16. Clerk, please call the roll.
Here.
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 Thank you very much. First up, ordinance rules claims, Chairwoman Ware.
I talked to Tim today, and I'm going to let Laura and Mike talk about it.
What's that?
It affects both of your department.
Right. The entire ordinance, it covers a variety of things. One is the modest raise for those in the part-time positions that we have for
Oh, this is for,
police, fire.
this is
Which one?
Administrative Code, authority to levy
Tax
tax.
allocation.
Beg your pardon.
Yeah, that's-
That
sorry
goes
about that.
straight to.
We'll get you on next. All right, Director of Finance.
Last year, when House Bill 5 was going through, the income tax ordinance was updated at that time. And when that happened, some language got changed, and it wasn't quite consistent with what was in the budget. Basically, it has to do with how the income tax is allocated once the dollars come in, whether it goes to general fund or capital improvements. So what this ordinance seeks to do is just to clean that up and make the ordinance language consistent with what you approved in last year's budget so that everything meshes. And I think I talked about last week with the budget presentation, we have been doing about an 80-20. This allows us to keep that for 16, and then for 17's budget right now, I have the 70-30, but that can be up to discussion each year.
And does it change yearly? You have one time to change it?
70-30, and then that second 0.5% of tax, it can be a decision each year.
Okay.
But for ease of projecting, we would anticipate, and part of the reason we're doing this is to create a consistency.
Yeah.
So that the whole thing would be 70-30 in most situations. And so that means 30% of the budget that we have would be guaranteed to be put towards capital projects, which I think, as Laura will share, is a very large percentage relative to our peer group. So it basically guarantees that we're spending dollars not just for personnel or other things, but for actual infrastructure in the city, which is really important.
And just to clarify, where is it at right now? I mean, basically our ordinance now, the capital is about 20%, right?
It was in the past, it was at about an 80-20 split.
Okay. So this will take more of the, like the increased revenue and increase by another 10% for capital.
Yes,
which
for
is
next
which is a good thing, because we need it.
But we also divert general funds that weren't allocated towards capital to capital projects every year.
Right, that's right.
During our budget, so
Right.
6 to 1, half a dozen the other.
Right. But then you know exactly what is capital. It's kind of all housed in that fund, and it makes it easier to kind of track that over time.
I like it. It's good.
All right. So I'm going to put it on the agenda for next week.
And that will be under emergency.
Yeah.
All right, very good.
2
Or
weeks.
2 weeks, yes, correct. Okay, next up, we have personnel and safety. That's me. Tim, I'll let you kind of quick overview.
Yes, that is the one I had referred to previously. And the amendments to this one include the modest increases for the raises for part-time positions that have gone a number of years without any increases. And these impact mostly the fire and EMS and the police department. There's in the agenda that had gone out on Friday in trying to make these changes, I had inadvertently taken off the section that covers general government, and those cover our summer hires, and I went ahead and made those changes in your packages. The only changes with those are for the skilled worker and the laborer that have those same increases. It also has a position that we worked with the finance union in converting a position that is what's considered a sensitive position, because it works frequently with information that's involved in collective bargaining, and that's an accounting position. And the director of finance's work with that as well, and we're going to convert one of those positions to exempt. And there's also a position in administration that they're looking as a director of administrative services, but they can address that probably better than I can.
And you touched on the, I don't know if I missed it, the uniform allowances as well?
Correct. What we used to have for a uniform allowances for the part-time employees, it's reflected there in section 2. It was an amount that was just paid out when the person was hired, regardless of the time of the year. This will reflect that if they're hired within the first half of the year, they get the entire stipend. If they're hired in the second half, then they'll receive 50%. And that prevents a situation where you may have an employee that's hired in December, they get the full stipend, and they turn around in January, they get the full stipend again. So it's just easier to reflect that in a proration. It also reflects that for dispatch, that benefit expires at the end of 2017 as part of their collective bargaining agreement.
And the salaries are in section 20 for both those positions. Is there any questions, council, for any of these items? And I spoke to the mayor earlier, as far as how the legislative agenda is going to go, we're going to be about 2.5, 3 weeks out. In the meantime, we'll be working on a job description with duties and whatnot as it relates to Director of Administrative Services. So we'll have that to review once that's complete.
Just as one point that was brought up, I had talked to some of you about this, and those of you that have been around, in the past we had the position, when Bill Bartos was there, we had the assistant administrator position. When Earl Wise was here, it was similar in responsibility, but it was called the Director of Administrative Services. But as we went through those positions, if we didn't have somebody in that position, we normally just took it out. We didn't keep that in there. And so one of the things that we're looking at now is similarly to what we have in the finance department, which obviously is working very well, is now that we have Laura as our finance director, we also have Shanna as our deputy finance director. So in Laura's absence, she can carry on those responsibilities and duties. What we have now is, we started out 10 years ago with 116 employees. Now we're down to, what is it? It was 91, now it's up to 94, 93. Is it 91 still? Okay.
Full-time.
Not 91 full-time. So, the hope is that, from time to time, you'll have Jim Benikas that serves as Mike Grimes' backup. But, really, the department heads are so busy with their own work, it's very hard to get any additional responsibilities done, other than just, being there, I guess, to answer the phone. And as you all know, we do not like to hire or add additional people if we don't have to, because it's usually, we look at it as a 30-year investment. When you hire somebody, you're going to have that employee for 30 years, assuming that they're doing a good job and, they stay with the city. That's how we look at it. So we never take adding a position lightly. But at the same time, especially when you have, with the city engineer's position, who is a rehire right now, and which is a great thing because you have all that experience. And the same thing with the city administrator. They've retired once and they've come back. But you've got to make sure that you have that succession planning in there in all areas. Because if you do not have that, it creates a big problem. So that's probably the one area that we're looking at that, organizationally we look at as a void. But it's not anything that we have somebody right now that we know that we want. We're not going to rush into it because we do know if you do not have a good fit, it's not best for the city. You have to have somebody that's skilled in those particular areas, yes.
I was just wondering, like when you commit to someone for a 30-year mortgage, because that's what it is, like a 30-year mortgage with someone that's good and they stick around and have all these expenses. I didn't know if there's something to be said for consultants, like a 1099 consultant that you pay a decent fee and they are responsible for their own taxes and their own benefits, or even if we had a different plan where we could do an HSA and just give them a little bit of compensation to the HSA plan, a different category than union or non-union, like we have. I don't know if that's even possible to do in the city with all these.
Well, actually what we do is we do contract out the work. There's a lot of work that's contracted out. One area that's probably we contract the most work out is in the engineering department because, Jim provides the oversight, but he'll contract a lot of the design work out, right? Larger projects, just because we don't have the manpower to do those. He has himself, and then he has the inspectors, and the inspectors are inspecting projects. So the question is, whenever you can do work with part-time employees from a cost perspective, that's a great savings to the city. Whenever you can do work with contractors, that's been very effective. One example, a very successful contract we have now is with the waste hauling and recycling. I mean, the residents gave it very high marks, but we do not have any employees that collect the waste or recycling. It's all contracted out. So in that case, you have our administrator managing a contract rather than managing employees. One of the areas that's tough to, you have some municipalities, I forget the name of it, I think it's out in the west coast, but they have almost all their services are contracted out. You have Plain Township, their services, their police department is contracted out. It's contracted with the sheriff's department. So really, when you look at city services, you can contract out really just about any city service. But then the question is that really what's going to be best for our city? Is it the best service? Is it going to be most cost efficient? And that's just something that we look at. In some cases, we've done a good job. In some cases, we do a little bit of contracting and a little bit of employees. The one example of that is the storm sewer catch basin replacement. We have our city employees that are replacing them while the contractors are replacing them. But that's why we've gotten nearly 1,000 done, or over 1,000, right? In the past, probably like 5 years, because we just simply couldn't have done it with our employees alone. So really to answer the question, it's that's a very good question. Contracting can be very helpful. Our part-timers, when you look at, and I hate to use the word part-timers because whenever you have an emergency with police, fire, or EMS, the people don't say, are you full or part-time? It's just they're in need and there's an emergency and they're all trained professionals. But if we had a full-time fire department for a city of our size, if you look at like Fairview Park or Avon Lake, I think their budget is in excess for fire and EMS alone of $6 million. Right? Or you would know better than that about that.
I wouldn't know offhand,
but yeah,
it's expensive.
And our budget for our fire and EMS now is a little over $2 million. And so, it's just thank God we have dedicated fire and EMS. So to answer that question, the biggest thing is if you look at it and you say, all right, if the people that have all the experience, if they were to leave at any given time, retire or move on, how much of that knowledge and experience have we been able to capture? And historically, we have done a very poor job of that. We have not been able to capture that, that knowledge and information. One example of it, but we're changing now because we're storing data electronically, which Mike and Jim Benikas and Jim Davis are working very hard on GIS. So for example, when you have a water main break and you go to turn the water valves to turn off the water, where's the water valve at? Is it buried? When you had some of the guys who've been around here for years, they could tell you, it's right down here in front of this house at the corner. but it could be completely covered with dirt. But they just, had it in memory. Well, now that they've retired, we don't have that luxury. You have water spewing out, and they're running around trying to find, the right valve, and in some cases the valve isn't, where it was supposed to be on the map. So Mike and Jim Benikas and Jim Davis, they have our employees going out and marking every valve, and they're putting it on the GIS, along with the stop signs, along with the storm sewers. So really, we'll be able to, in an instant, be able to find out exactly where the water valves are at. You see, so that's kind of complementing that succession plan, is that transfer of information. But the other thing is just having somebody, as a backup. And I think we're solid in every department right now. It's just in the administrative office, we're just light. So,
Dave, do you want to do, so we've got it's a $75,000 ad annually, right?
that's equivalent to what the other positions are, most of the other department head positions are at. It would be up to that amount, yes.
Okay, and then is it currently on page 13 in the budget request? Did you make that in already?
Yes. I asked Laura to put that
So
in.
that's the difference between 57 and 74. Because some of the budget would also come from water and other funds.
Yes.
Like the other administrative.
So if you have a position and they're going to be, whether you call it a director of administrative services, we just want to make sure that the title is broad enough so they're not restricted to one particular department. Because, for example, after talking with Mike and Laura, there's a number of projects that just require somebody to drive. And one example would be, exploring new phone systems. It just takes time. It takes time to evaluate those, find out what is going to be the best fit. Another one is we ran into a speed bump with our electronic water meters, because Tim Fox fortunately reviewed the software warranty, the agreement, and it wasn't something that would be satisfactory for us to enter into. So we held back on that. But now there's a lot of follow-up that's required. You have Jim Benikas, who's playing a role in it, but he's making sure the streets are getting paved. Jim Davis is making sure that his projects are getting taken care of. And Mike, has plenty of work, sometimes even answering the phone if he's the only one in the office. So it's, I don't mean to sound like I'm complaining, it just makes, it's just common sense that you have to make sure you have sufficient backup and succession plan.
So you're saying you need somebody more to get this ship moving forward and better, moving better,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and the thing which clarified that, I think the most with me, is because sometimes you think, okay, maybe we're looking at this too long, maybe we're, maybe we have some blind spots with this. But then after we talked, Mike and I have been talking about this since Bill left. I've been talking about it with Jim Benikas too, but then when Laura came in, she recognized it right away. And so that was, because she said that she had a number of projects that she certainly could have help on if we had somebody in that position.
Would this be somebody that can help Jim Benikas? Because I know Jim has a lot of engineering jobs to do, and I'm sure he's busy doing a lot of busybody stuff that's not dollar productive work to get the infrastructure stuff rolling.
Yeah, well,
So,
for
and
example, for example, like right now, you figure you have all the department heads and there is, we always say, oh, everyone's so busy and all that, but we say everyone was busy when we had 116 employees. Now, you take that down to 91, people are truly busy. Also because the requirements of the work are increasing. You have increased regulations in every single department that we're in, particularly now in finance. So you have fewer workers, you have increased regulations. The thing is, so I think we are very cost efficient right now. I think we are very, very solid because we're pretty close to what the recommendations were for our performance audit back, was that 2009? Yeah, 9. So we know we're being very cost efficient as compared to the other municipalities. But I know that you as council members and also myself, you figure if each one of you call, Mike Grimes or one of the department heads with just one complaint a week, and I do too, that's 8. And so what I'm saying is that it's, that's just a part of every day. That's in addition to all the other things they have going on. But if we expect stuff to get done, they just prioritize. It's just a matter of priority. And so in some cases, there's, Mike might have labor negotiations going on, and it could be a very, technical negotiation. But at the same time, if there's a dead skunk in front of somebody's house, or there's a problem with an overpopulation of animals in a particular area, that's something that's not going to be solved in just one, picking up the dead skunk. It's talking to the residents, getting out there, finding out what the problem is, if there really is a lot of stray animals. I'm just using that as one example, and the phone system is another. There's we could probably go on with examples, but I won't bore you with that.
Okay. Good?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
So what's the timeline on this?
Well, we're not going to be, as far as the legislative agenda goes, it won't till the 19th of December. And like the mayor said, he's not in any rush to fill the
If you
position.
have a person,
No.
this is just something you might see
Right.
happens here.
Buildings like so.
Yeah.
So I guess to answer that question, I don't think there really is a timetable.
What's that?
I guess to answer Mark's question, there really is not
Yeah,
a
no, we
set
don't have, it's not
timetable.
like we have anybody specific. The thing is, what we're, just like in any, you're always looking for candidates that you think, oh boy, this person might be good for this position, or this other person. But the problem is, you don't know if that person is interested, or somebody else could come up. I mean, it's just, how I've seen things transpire over the past how many years. I mean, and you folks on council have seen the same thing, where one minute you think that, hey, we're solid, and then all of a sudden somebody decides to retire or leave, and it's like, scramble, let's find a good fit. So that's really what the goal is just find the best possible people that we can, that, has experience, is knowledgeable, and works well with other people, especially Mike.
I concur, Mayor, in the sense that, Jim Benitez almost pursued another position in Leschwell, right? And Mike's got a wealth of knowledge here. If those two individuals aren't sitting next to you, we've lost
A lot.
80 years of institutional knowledge, and you better have somebody aboard that's gonna, it'd be nice to have somebody aboard that you can pick from and say, you know what, at least I know what I've got, where I'm going, and so forth. So I think it's a smart thing to look into this.
It's strategic.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like a successor possibly.
When Laura knew, Gary's new, so
Right.
we're gonna start growing that path.
Yeah.
I think you have to think succession planning with any business that's gonna keep moving forward. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. And we want Mike and Jim to be here as long as they want to be here, obviously, but it does make sense to have somebody else learn.
But you know what is,
Like, did you post everything, or did you ask it?
Well, like the mayor said, we've already done it in the finance department.
Right.
With Shannon, the deputy director, so.
I mean, that has been, when our finance director decided to, retire, and Shannon was there, it was perfect for the city, because she kept everything, running, and kept this, nice and smooth. People got paid, there was, the bills were paid, everything was taken care of. But had she not been there, or if there were others that may not have the same ability, they're all great workers, they just may not know how to do that specific, take on that specific responsibility, it becomes a problem. And I remember back when Kim Counccil, this is back when I was serving as the administrator, he had all this knowledge and information, and when he decided to retire, we're like, oh, Kim, what do you do? How do you manage all this information? And it's not really until somebody leaves and then you're training somebody else for that position. You just assume, like, don't you know how, no, I don't. And they can be a very bright, experienced person, but if they don't know, then, so one way that we're looking to assist in that is just electronically storing information and for easy retrieval. And that's what the GIS is, that's what it should, satisfy. Because right now, if you go down and look for a valve, in most cases, you're pulling out a map that may be out of date, and, you know, it can be a headache, right? Or you just call somebody that retired and ask them.
Okay.
All right.
All right, that'll be on emergency as well. All right, last but not least, Councilman Fonte would like to discuss cellular towers.
So I'm gonna take about 20 minutes on this. Just kidding. Hey, so, Tim Fox sent out a letter to all council and the affiliates here on the 26th of October in regards to cell tower issues. And after I read this, it made my brain explode, and I had a conversation with Tim. And I just have to thank Tim for being so sharp to catch all these little things. Because I'm telling you right now, it's like a train wreck out there.
Yeah.
And let me just reiterate a couple things, and then Tim can chime in on the legalese of it. But in a nutshell, so let me just recap the letter if you didn't memorize it. So basically, there's a company out of California that applied to put 2 cell towers, 120-foot cell towers. You see them all over, the scape. But basically, they wanted to put them in the lawn strip on the north side of Walgreens right here in town. And they also wanted to put one right near Swenson's, across the street from Swenson's. Now, of course, they just put one up recently in Kmart too, back in the Kmart area. Of course, there's the church issue and these other ones. So what's interesting is, now these are businesses or entrepreneurs, so this company went to the PUCO and got it a certificate to use it as a utility. Therefore, they basically can come into all these little towns and cities across the country and basically try to trick us, since we have 10, they didn't trick us, but they try to trick us into getting a permit, and then the courts overrule it, and then say, hey guys, guess what? There's not it's a reasonable request, you need to give it to them. So therefore, now these cell phones or cell towers pop up. But the issue with the cell towers is that it isn't like they're going to offer us the service. Hey guys, it's in your city, let's get some benefit. No, it's so they can tag Sprint, Verizon, AT&T on it, lease it, make all this money. So the frustration that I have is that luckily Gary is going to be involved, Tim's involved to talk with the attorney. So the attorney's from Akron, so he comes down and he posts all this information to try to basically trick us into making a mistake because we're not sharp, and then they override it and put it in, we're screwed. So the 2 things that came to mind when I wanted to bring this up, and I did talk to Tim about this a little bit, is I have a picture of what the cell towers look like. You've seen them already. Here, why don't you pass them down? Here's a couple for you guys. So the idea then, the 2 things that I'd like to see happen, and this is where I need the input from everybody here. So let's just say, at this point, as a legislative area of our town, we can write the rules and the laws on what we have. So to look at the front page, this is what we see everywhere. The second 2 pages are what I'd like to see, which are camouflaged or cell towers that don't look like cell towers. So if we're going to be stuck with cell towers, can't we write some laws that say they have to be aesthetically pleasing? So here's a few examples. Like maybe we need a flagpole or possibly a nice tree. So this gives you some ideas, but there's companies that have been doing this. Hey guys, I'm losing here. You like my pictures? Okay, so here's what I want. If I had a magic wand, do I have your attention, guys?
Yeah, you got it. You shouldn't hand stuff out unless you want people to.
We are commenting on your excellent presentation.
Well, here's what I need you to do. I need you to listen listen. So here's what I want you guys to think about. So let's just say hypothetically, we're talking about broadband, which is like a $22 million project. This might be a $150,000 project. Can you imagine if we owned it as a city, we could then lease it for, say, between $1,500 and $6,000 a month and have a decent return on investment and feed that money back into our system so that we can keep the streets and do portage and do some of the streets and streetscapes. That's just if I had a magic wand. And then the second magic wand would be, do they have a shorter version of these towers? Instead of 125 feet, and we do like 75 feet and make a nice tree. So the second 2 pages represent examples of atmosphere, blended into the atmosphere. Let's make them. If they're going to put these cell towers everywhere, make them blend into the background. We have the authority and the power, and I would recommend that we go to the jurisdictions around us, because you can see we have a 6-7 mile radius that we can control to say, hey guys, if you're going to do this, Because they have no intentions of sharing the joy with us. They're just plopping them up everywhere they can and manipulate the system because the federal override. Tim, can you speak on that a second?
Correct. We always look at what ordinances we have locally, but sometimes in situations such as this, where the FCC gets involved, federal government gets involved, there's, as you may have heard in some of these discussions and the guests that we have invited here, a couple of them have made the comment that telecommunications, broadband, in that genre, are the next public utility. Now, these corporations that provide those services, they're pretty smart, of course, and they see that just as we had with First Friends Church, if you were involved with that, some of the information was leaked. It was private initially, but it was leaked that there was an initial payment somewhere in the neighborhood of $145,000 up front, and then a couple $1,000s a month for a long-term lease, simply to place this cellular tower on First Friends land. Under this belief that they have the right as acting as a public utility, our revised code provides that municipalities won't discriminate in allowing access to the city's right-of-ways. Therefore, they believe that they have the right to place their towers in the city's right-of-way and have come in with permits and said the best location for that company is to place a tower here and a tower here. We're asking for a permit, and we're going to go ahead and put these 120-foot towers up in these locations, and they disagree whether or not they have to follow our ordinances as far as cell tower placing and the equipment in the towers and where they're located, going through our planning commission and obtaining conditional use and so forth. They believe that they're somehow exempt from that. So we did, Gary and I met with their attorney, we talked about that and asked that his company follow our rules, because outside of that, for all intents and purposes, it would likely involve litigation. We believe, and it appears that the courts support us, that we have the right to legislate so long as we do it fairly amongst the providers and don't discriminate, that we can legislate such things as aesthetics and certain things in the proper location. One of the key factors that we had with the First Friends placement was there was a concern of where it was going to be placed. One of our criteria is they have to demonstrate a couple things: that there aren't other locations that the tower could be placed, that it wouldn't have such an impact on the community. Right there is a local housing communities, different neighborhoods and so forth. They're very close to major artery and Market Avenue, but also they needed to demonstrate that there was a drop calls, there was a loss of connections and so forth, and that was the reason for placing a tower there and not in some other places, and it wasn't being placed there simply because they wanted to be able to obtain that service. They had to demonstrate through their own studies presented to us to review that there definitely was a need, and that was the best location, and there weren't any alternate locations. So with this new type of requirements from our federal courts, we have to be cognizant of those companies coming and asking for these applications. The reason being is that there's a very rigid process that you're required to follow, And if you don't follow it to the letter, there's what they've termed as a shot clock, that you need to respond in a timely manner to their applications and answer certain questions within certain time parameters. And if you run out of time, and it can be less than 6 months from the time that they've made this application, they can appeal to a federal district court and make the allegation that you're stonewalling. You're just dragging this out because you don't wish to have these types of towers there, that you're discriminating against those. And oftentimes what happens is it's really straightforward. You've missed your shot clock. A federal judge can come in and say that this application is deemed approved. And it might not have met a single criteria that we have in place, but because we haven't followed this shot clock, it's deemed approved and the tower goes up. What I think is probably most frustrating with this is the locations for these towers. It's not to provide, for that company to provide service to our residents. This corporation wishes to be the first one in to have these towers located in our right-of-way and then offer to the providers, you can hook your equipment on our tower. You'd already secured these in North Canton.
That's
where
the
they'll
killer,
get
that's
paid.
the killer point, what I'm saying.
Yes.
So here's my two wishes. My one wish would be, why couldn't we just control the tower and let people come and lease it to them into infinity if we had the gumption to do that? But at the very least, could we possibly do legislation on emergency to get some language in there with Tim and Gary's help, and possibly the finance guy here, to see if it's possible we can put language in there that we want these cell towers to be aesthetically pleasing for the atmosphere, so we don't have that visual noise. And that's at the very
Can I ask
least.
a question about that? So my question, assuming the answer is yes, right?
Yes.
Do you guys feel like the language that we have currently in our zoning ordinance is sufficient to deal with this issue right now? Or do you think that we need more robust language? Or is the language
Here's
itself?
what you get, right?
Right, but is the language itself,
Yeah.
are we, because of the characterization as a utility, are we limited now in a way that we wouldn't have been before?
I think that we need to take a close look at what we have right now, which prior to this federal legislation worked very well for us. And you had to meet these certain requirements so that the burden was on those making the application request, where now it seems as though it's almost reversed. They've come in and said this is the best place. Until you tell us otherwise, we kind of have the upper hand. And so since the framework has changed, I think we have to take a close look at what we have and be proactive. I had mentioned a few months ago that the city of Cincinnati was one of those that was hit with this, and they're working on doing the same thing. I believe their former ordinance was approximately 2 to 3 pages. They beefed it up to maybe 25 pages of legislation to put in place to help manage it. They know they can't prevent it, but with legislation in place, you still are permitted to act reasonably. And some of that, I spoke with Councilman Fonte, and you may put in place, so long as you have that legislation in place, whether or not your towers look like what's on the front, or you require that they do things such as this. You have to have the legislation in place.
That's what we need to talk about, but here's the thing, I mean, I just gave you a snippet of stuff that might fit into our atmosphere, but there's a company in California called Larson who actually been doing this since the 90s, and they'll take, like in the desert, you have cacti, you know, so it looks like a cactus. If you have old-fashioned streetlights, you can make it look like streetlights, and there's a lot of press on it, and then there's also, even if we wanted to say, okay, realistically, what could we lease this space for? So why they're coming here is they're trying to secure location through, it's like eminent domain in my opinion, how they pulled this off, because if we screw it up because you're not a good attorney, then they're gonna put it there anyhow, and it's gonna look just like these. And they can put like 3, this is one carrier, but if you see 3, you know how there's some towers with 3 or 4 groups and stuff? That's all those different carriers, and they really don't care. They're just making money leasing. You can lease between $1,500 and $6,000 a month is what they can charge. So I mean, that, if you had a $150,000 tower, I mean, that's a pretty decent return on investment. So that's an ongoing flow of money coming into our coffers. But even if we can't do that, at the very least, we then say it has to be aesthetically pleasing, however we can create that language and do it right away, because they're actively trying to, once they secure these spots, we're done. And the other thing is that maybe this might bleed over into Plain or some of the other municipalities where when you drive down the landscape, I was just looking at a place in Green I have, sits up to a farm, beautiful setting, and I was looking and I see 5 cell towers in the back. I mean, they look like they're all touching, but they're not. See, because these companies, they don't want to share. They just want to control it and lease it. And then so the next guy, AT&T, would come in, they'll go right down the street and put one. So that's why we have so many blinking towers everywhere. So I'm just saying, let's get on the front end of it. And like I said, it wasn't for Tim sharing this letter, I wouldn't even thought about it. And then when I went online and looked and found some examples, I'm like, you know what? Let them spend a little more money if they're going to do this. So it looks nice. And even the equipment they put in the fences, there's those big equipments. They have like little tiny houses that are, you know, like say like we have wrought iron and brick and stone. They can actually make these like little houses and house this stuff in it and then run like whatever, a flagpole or a tree or something beside it, and it looks beautiful. But you know it's going to cost a little more money. So you know, that we can control, but we can't control saying, hey, you guys can't come. We can't do that anymore.
And see, that's one of those very things that we had just discussed, that there are some consultants, there are some attorneys that see this niche market right now and are specializing on this. And in about 2 weeks, I'm going to meet an attorney to hear some information on this very subject. But it really wish to be, once we get some more information on it, to perhaps ask a consultant to help us in putting the proper legislation in place for what North Canton wishes to do, so that we're not on the outside looking in and we get a cell tower placed in. I'm not kidding you. Some of those are placing them in the very center of the city, in the city square, Hartville. This same person came to Hartville and said, I want to place this 120-foot tower in your... But I don't know if they said no and then did all of the other things that are required to meet that shot block. And if they don't, once you go over that time period, there's a presumption that you dragging your feet unfairly, you discriminated against them. The federal judge can say the tower remains. You're going to have to live with it.
So what's the game plan, Tim? You're going to talk to this other attorney that specializes in this and then come back as soon as we can with some kind of modification of our...
As soon as possible, because you know
Yes.
it's a matter of time.
Well, it's not going to be quick either, it's a change in our zoning.
Yeah.
So they have to go through this.
We can't make an amendment.
It's got to come back here, you know, it's going to be 6 months until this is changed, essentially.
So at least we'll start the process.
Through our process.
Can we fast track it some way?
No, unfortunately, no. Let's go through all that.
Okay.
And it can't be on a.
Good proactive approach here for both you guys.
Well, that's what I wanted to say.
And your homework is really well done, but let's get going with it then. I mean, we gotta do it.
I mean, you see here, it's just now that I brought to your attention again, you'll see them everywhere.
Looks
It
nice.
irritates you. And you want to go back and say, hey guys, dress that up a little bit. But once they put it in, you won't be able to do anything.
You can go online. I saw a YouTube video of a gentleman that said recently his neighborhood had buried all the utilities
I
that
saw
were
that.
underground. He said one day he came home from work and there was a patch about a 12 by 12 dug out from his lawn. And he's trying to figure out what's going on. He's making phone calls and they said, well, we're placing a tower there. And he gave the comment essentially over my dead body and was protesting and so forth. My understanding from the video is that the company responded, okay, we're going to take a look at this. We're going to go back and see what we can do. So it was quiet for 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, he came back, and not only was a new patch of land about 10 foot away, but still on his front lawn, and a tower there. said we had the right to place it here because we're a public utility, we placed it in the
Just
right
see, we
way.
don't want that happening.
And he had no lease, he got no benefit other than
Right.
the,
Well, that's what I mean, it's like.
the tower on his front
They
lawn.
just take it and that's that.
Camera goes right down, no telephone poles. And many of those, for municipalities that have telephone poles, they can have smaller towers and they can place these devices on the telephone poles. It's just that they require more of them because they're not as tall, so you'll have more of those. And I would think for those municipalities or the areas where you have the telephone poles, you probably wouldn't even notice another device on there. But for areas where the utilities are buried, and just from someone running some computer diagnostic and saying, right there's the best spot, that's where the tower's going to go, it's going to be in this right of way, that unfortunate neighborhood or that person or that area has to suffer with it. So my recommendation is trying to get out in front of it and understand how it works and how to protect ourselves, but still not limit, the technological advances that it offers.
So there's a place called Airwave, and you can actually go to Airwave and sell your lease. Like if you had a tower in your yard or your municipality, you can sell them the rights, you can check and see what the pricing is. It's like a broker. It's a broker that sells all this stuff. And so they have, I mean, it's amazing if you go online, look, there's a map that shows where every single cell tower is, who the leasing rights are to. Everything is public. And you would lose it if you saw how many cell towers are there, and there's a bunch more coming. So I just want to make sure we get on this quickly.
Well,
I beat it.
what does it take? I mean, we've got water towers. We're looking at, what we have. The way things are going, in a couple of years, we might have a chimney over there that might be tall enough for a tower. I mean, we have things that we could create.
See, that's private. It is private.
And if we're gonna build another water tower, Jim has all kinds of plans for that. Or, maybe those are,
Well, in the future, if those are the spots they identified, like we know right now, Swenson's and Walgreens are two spots they identified. So therefore, if we were really aggressive, we could actually, research it quickly and have our people or someone contracted out to build it, make it aesthetically pleasing, and then we control who puts stuff on it, and we get the benefits of it. So that's what I'm saying, if I had Imagine One, that's what I'd want to do. Because I think of, investments. I want something to sustain itself and bring money in. But if not, at least if we make them say, hey guys, this is what you have to do if you're going to sell a tower, then it's going to benefit everybody that can see it in eyeshot, as well as, maybe the other municipalities will catch on. I mean, it isn't like you sit around thinking, oh, a cell tower is a cell tower. You don't really think of it as a tree, or think of it as a bush, or, a clock tower. And they make clock towers, everything. There's tons of images. Okay,
our high school did the same thing over there. They got a big flagpole, so it's the same.
yeah. Okay, that's all I
Okay,
have for you today.
good, Don. Very well done.
Thank you, Don. All right, since the meeting followed this as a special council meeting, we can only discuss what's on the agenda. A couple housekeeping measures as far as the legislative agenda moving forward. We'll have our budgetary meeting on December 5th. If anyone has any questions in advance for our Director of Finance, please get them to her. It'll help us move that meeting along a little smoother. We will have a first reading on the budget on the 12th of December, then pass on emergency and a special council meeting on the 19th. And then we will not meet again until January 23rd, with Martin Luther King Day being January 16th. Okay? And that is it. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. And then I will call to order the special council meeting Monday, November 21st, 2016 at 7:52 p.m. Clerk, please call the roll.
Here.
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 Thank you very much. At this time, if you wish to address council, please step forward, state your name and address.
Chuck Osborne, 307 Fairview Street, southeast of Canton, Ohio. I'd like to compliment Mr. Fonte, I guess, for keeping his eyes and ears open and thinking of what some of us would consider a nuisance being next to our homes. But I would point out to you that a cell tower does not bring increased traffic. It does not bring increased obtrusive lighting. It does not bring flooding. And I could go on and on. So I just wish this council was a little more attentive about what's allowed to happen over here on the South Hoover District South parking lot, which the city contributed to with all the lighting that you allowed to be put in on East Maple. Like I told you many times before, it's lit up like Las Vegas. I don't have to turn on the lights in the middle of the night in my house because there's so much light that comes in. I guess I can pull the blinds, but it'd be nice to camouflage those, like you said, if that's available. But to repeat myself, you don't get flooding, you don't get traffic. It's not really an attractive nuisance. It would give people a place to congregate. I just wish there was that same level of attention and concern. And as I've thought about that whole south parking lot mess, because it's consumed our lives here. Having read through the minutes when they initially tried to change the zoning, and this council actually rebuffed that. Because I've read those minutes many a times. Everyone up here was concerned and looking out for the residents. But I don't know what happened from the time they rezoned it because, as we all know, Maple Street realized, the hell with the zone change. Because I guess there was undercurrent that you guys didn't want to rezone it. So they plowed ahead with a conditional use, which, by the way, a conditional use permit was never issued. Your illustrious law director has tried to convince me and state officials that the application for the permit is the permit. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. You go apply for a driver's license or a marriage license or any other kind of license. Does that application constitute the license or the permit? Mr. Benikas has created a memo where they advised Maple Street of our appeal and asked them to halt. Did they halt? No. They've also advised them to no longer use the widened parking lot till the appeal is approved. Has that happened? There is no enforcement of your ordinances here unless you want to enforce them. So anyway, hats off to Mr. Fonte, hats off to whoever after years and years and years, and I assume it's you, Mr. Grimes, we can now see the screen up there. And to pick up on what a former, I guess, teacher of Mr. Foltz, she would always complain about the acoustics out here. And her name slips my mind because I guess I'm getting old myself. Your discussion about some kind of salary or a new position, can you tell me what that was and loud enough and clear enough? Because I'm sitting right there and I don't know what it was for, to be honest with you.
Really, what we've had in the past is that we had the position of Director of Administrative Services.
Mr. Mayor, he's got a few more seconds here left, and then maybe you
I'm
guys,
done.
maybe you guys
I'll
can get
step
together
in and-
afterwards.
Because I can't hear a damn thing. Oh, sorry, Mr. Fox is going to leap after me. Should I look around for the police? I'm sorry.
You understand we have.
Mr. Fox, you're out of line. He did not give you permission to speak.
I'm stating.
He did not give you permission to speak.
That's it.
Please, Mr. Peters, maintain. Please, Mr. Peters, maintain control.
Listen. Your
I apologize.
5 minutes are up. You can get with the mayor after the meeting. He can discuss that position
Thank
with you. You are welcome. Is there anyone else wishing to address council? Please step forward, state your name and address. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to old business. May I have a motion and a second to read by title only the third reading of ordinance number 74-16?
So moved.
Second.
Yes.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Yes.
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 Yes, we've discussed this extensively, and the ones that can concur that this is best for the city and our employees. So without further ado, I'll entertain a motion and a second to adopt the third reading.
Second.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you very much. And since nothing else can come before this council in a special council meeting, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.